You're standing in the soft, amber hush of a chilly dawn, somewhere deep in the steppes. The kind of place where the horizon never ends and the wind is the only gossip. You don't know what day it is, because out here, time is a long flat plain. And that's all it needs to be. There's a horse breathing beside you, warm, steady, like a kettle not quite boiling. Its breath curls into the morning air, mingling with yours. Somewhere in the grass behind you, a cricket gives up on pretending it slept. The only thing louder than the quiet is the wool-lined thud of your boots as you step forward onto the ancient postal highway of the Mongol Empire, the Yam. Welcome to the 13th century. Welcome to the middle of absolutely everywhere. You probably won't make it through this day, and honestly, that's the point. Before we begin, go ahead and gently press that like button, like smoothing a wrinkle from an old saddle blanket. Subscribe if your eyes are already getting heavy, and tell me in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is there. I'll pretend I'm writing it down with a quill. Now let's ease into tonight's journey. The YAM system, short for or two, but don't worry, there's no quiz. Wasn't just a courier network. It was the vascular system of the Mongol Empire. A relay line of fresh horses, sheltering stations, dried cheese, and whispered secrets passed from one wind-chapped face to the next. You walk, or rather you're led, to the first relay station. It looks modest. A yurt flanked by a lean-to stable, a ring of hoofprints around it like petals on a wildflower. There's a tiny carved wooden sign, probably indicating this stop's name or maybe just saying, "Don't kick the horse." A boy no older than 15 stands near the entrance, wearing felt boots and a coat the color of earth. He nods once, couriers don't talk much, and swaps out your mount without ceremony. Your new horse doesn't greet you either. It's got places to be. One major historical fact to hold on to: by the 13th century, the YAM could stretch nearly 200 miles in a single day if the message was urgent, which is faster than some modern postal services, but we won't name names. And how did the riders navigate such vast, monotonous terrain without a single helpful GPS voice telling them to turn left at the goat? By memory mostly, but also by the stars, animal trails, and an uncanny knowledge of wind patterns passed down like family recipes. You ride now, your legs tucked against the chill, as your horse glides across low hills that ripple like old parchment. There are no signs, no markers, but somehow you feel sure you're going the right way. Every so often, a bird dives from the sky, as if it also has somewhere to deliver a message. You wonder what it's carrying. A complaint about millet portions? A love note from one falcon to another? The Mongols did, in fact, train birds for message delivery, though that was more of a backup plan. Or possibly just for fun. Historians still debate whether messenger falcons were official or just a particularly dramatic choice. You pass a pair of travelers going the other way, slow and dust-covered. They nod. One of them is holding a sack of fermented mare's milk. You politely do not make eye contact with the milk. The sun is still low, casting a copper glow over the steppes. You're not tired yet, not really, but your mind is already beginning to float, the way it does when you've stared at too many clouds in a row. It's not boredom, it's soft focus. Out here, monotony is the magic. At the next station, a pot of something thick and brownish is handed to you without a word. You eat it with a carved spoon. It tastes like mutton, smoke, and someone else's nostalgia. No one says grace, but you feel grateful anyway. You sleep for 1 hour on a felt mat. The wind doesn't. It brushes against the walls of the yurt like it's looking for someone to talk to. Then you're back on the road again, or what passes for one. A barely there line of flattened grass, just enough to whisper, keep going. Out here, every footstep is a message, and every pause is a paragraph break. The morning fog burns off like a sigh, revealing a slow sunrise stretching across the plains like honey on an uneven plate. You squint into it not because it's bright, but because it feels like something you're supposed to do in epics. You're 20 miles in, maybe 30. Who's counting? The horses, probably. They always know. Up ahead, a river winds through the land like it got lost and didn't want to admit it. You and your horse clomp across a makeshift wooden bridge. Sturdy, but just barely. A squirrel watches you pass, clearly judging your posture. The courier system wasn't built overnight. Genghis Khan didn't just wake up one day and say, "Let's invent express mail." The yam grew out of a need to keep control, to pass military commands, tax reports, birthday wishes, and poetry. Yes, poetry. Mongol princes sent poems along this network, some of which were presumably better than others. One obscure detail you wouldn't expect: some relay stations had trained dogs to help alert staff when a rider was arriving. Not guard dogs, notification dogs, like very fluffy, meat-scented doorbells. You roll past a weathered OBO, a sacred stone cairn used by travelers to mark their path and say a prayer to the spirits. You dismount briefly, place a pebble of your own on the mound, and whisper something not even you understand. It feels appropriate. Then back up, always moving, because in the yam system, lingering too long was frowned upon. There's even an old traveler's joke. He who naps at the relay wakes up without his boots. The terrain shifts now subtly. The grass is a little shorter. The wind a little more playful, like it's finally warmed up and wants to show off. You pass a herd of shaggy cattle being herded by a boy on a donkey that looks older than wisdom itself. They barely look up as you pass. Out here, couriers are just part of the scenery. Still, you begin to feel it. The repetition, the rhythm, the sway of the saddle and the steady clip of hooves. Like the world has chosen one background beat and stuck with it. You're not lost. You can't be. Because the yam didn't just rely on paths, it relied on people. Relay station keepers often passed knowledge through songs and rhymes, remembering distances by melody. You wonder what kind of song you're riding through right now. A lullaby? A dirge? A work song for a job no one sees but everyone depends on? Historians still debate whether couriers received regular pay or were compensated in food and horses. There's evidence of both, which seems about right. If you're riding across continents with only dried cheese and a deeply committed pony, you probably take what you can get. At midday, you're handed a chunk of dried curd and a sliver of salted meat. You eat slowly, the way you peel an old sticker, carefully with a little confusion. Still, it hits the spot. You're not even sure what the spot is anymore, but it's definitely been hit. Another rider passes in the opposite direction, eyes focused, saddlebag bulging. You nod. They nod. This may be the most meaningful relationship you've had all week. Clouds begin to gather, slow and lazy, like sheep with no urgency. You wrap your coat tighter, not because you're cold, but because it feels like something a courier would do in a painting. Ahead, another station, this one painted with soot patterns on the door. You wonder if it means rest here or watch out for the goat. A short woman with windburned cheeks hands you a scroll sealed with wax. You're not supposed to open it. You do not open it. You set off again. Always forward, because the wind doesn't rewind, and neither do Mongol couriers. And somewhere behind you, the OBO you visited now holds your pebble. One tiny stone in a sea of memory. The wind picks up, the sun softens, and your horse still knows the way. You've lost track of time. But that's perfectly normal out here. Time doesn't tick. It drifts. Like smoke from a cooking fire or the trail dust from the last courier you'll never quite catch. The landscape is a long sigh, dry grasses that shimmer like dull gold under a powdery sky. Every so often, a tree appears, twisted by the wind into a shape that seems to point somewhere. Maybe it's a message, or maybe it's just a very persuasive tree. You reach another or two, a yam station, just as a pair of shaggy goats are being shooed out of the way by a sleepy man holding a ladle like it's a sword. He gives you a once-over, says nothing, and gestures toward a bucket of water. It tastes of tin and travel. Perfect. Inside the yurt, a stack of replacement saddlebags waits neatly by the wall, each labeled in Mongolian script so old it looks like the letters are yawning. You don't need to read them. You're just here to swap, sip, and move. Here's a useful historical fact to put in your metaphorical saddlebag. By the height of the Mongol Empire, there were over 1,400 yam stations stretching from China to Eastern Europe. Some were only 25 miles apart. Others spread wider across the emptier plains. Riders like you, well, fictional sleepy you, could change horses up to 40 times in a single long-distance trip. You strap on the fresh saddlebag and check your message pouch. Still sealed, still light, still full of mystery. You mount again, muscles remembering the movement, and let the horse choose the pace. As you ride, you pass by the skeletal remains of an old wooden signpost. It leans slightly to one side, pointing nowhere in particular. Probably used to say something like, "Next tea house, 180 miles. You pretend it still does. The wind brings the smell of smoke and juniper. Somewhere far off, someone's burning something to keep warm. You imagine a family you'll never meet, huddled in a yurt, telling stories about wolves and emperors, hoping the pot doesn't boil dry. Then the terrain shifts again, this time to something almost rocky. A few low cliffs rise up to your left, like the land suddenly remembered it has depth. You ride along a trail worn thin by centuries of hooves and weather. Below, tucked into the valley, a small, unexpected garden appears. Just a few plots of wild onions and root vegetables, protected by a fence made of bones. Not the ominous kind, mostly goat, decorative, practical. The two aren't mutually exclusive. And here's a wonderfully obscure detail. Some yam stations doubled as agricultural outposts. The couriers weren't just delivering messages, they sometimes delivered seeds, trade information, recipes, probably at least one overly long poem about horses. A scrappy dog runs out from the next station barking, not menacingly, more like it's announcing your arrival with the enthusiasm of a very underpaid town crier. You dismount, toss it a dried meat scrap, and it accepts you as one of its own. You rest briefly here. The keeper offers you a piece of something that might be bread or might be cheese. It has the texture of old parchment and the taste of commitment. You chew it slowly and nod like it's gourmet. Historians still debate whether yam station keepers were compensated directly by the khans or supported by local taxes. Either way, the result was the same. They knew their job mattered, because without them, the empire couldn't breathe. You ride again. The clouds gather thicker now, casting a soft gray glow over everything. It's not quite rain, just the idea of rain, whispered softly across the wind. Your cloak flaps a little more now. You fasten it tighter. In the distance, a line of mountains begins to rise. Not immediate, not threatening, just the promise that your journey will, eventually, tilt upward. For now it's flat, steady, like a song stuck on repeat. As the sun begins to dip, the horizon stains red and brown and the grass glows like embers. You pass a lone figure walking the opposite way, leading a mule cart loaded with dried herbs and paper scrolls. They tip their head to you. You do the same. This night you won't stop in a yurt. Instead, you sleep under the stars. Your horse tethered, the scroll pouch beneath your head like a pillow of secrets. The fire crackles low. A cricket chirps somewhere nearby. The world breathes in, then out. You close your eyes, and the yam keeps going without you. You wake before the sun, because that's what the road demands. Not because you're eager, though let's pretend that's true. The fire has gone out, but the coals still glow dimly, like forgotten lanterns. Your breath clouds the air. Your fingers are stiff, and your legs remind you that horseback travel is not, in fact, romantic. It is a partnership of bruises and trust. You check the message pouch again. Still sealed. Still untouchable. You wonder who it's for. Maybe it's a command from a khan. Maybe it's a shopping list. Either way, it's not yours to know. That's the rule. The message belongs to someone else, you just carry it. You mount again, the saddle creaking like it's clearing its throat. Ahead, the plains roll onward, shifting now into foothills that curve and dip like lazy waves. Every rock you pass is a marker of someone else's journey. Maybe another courier, maybe a soldier, maybe someone who never arrived. Here's your major historical insight for the day. The yam wasn't just for the military. It was also for merchants, scholars, and emissaries. Even Marco Polo used it. That's right, he might have ridden this very route. And complained the whole time, probably. You begin to climb slightly now, the path threading between low hills dotted with scrub and a few stubborn trees that look like they've been through things. The horse breathes heavier, but it's steady. Couriers didn't get the flashy horses, they got the reliable ones. The ones who knew when not to panic. A bird of prey circles above, then disappears into the blue. You decide it was wishing you luck, or laughing at your saddle sores. The next station is unusual. Built into the side of a hill, half of it is underground. You duck inside and find warmth, smoke, and the smell of stewed meat. A man with a nose like a broken flute hands you a bowl and says, "Don't ask." So you don't. There's a mural on the wall, faded and chipped, of a giant eagle delivering scrolls in its talons. Probably not historically accurate, but undeniably majestic. You learn from the keeper that a courier passed through here only hours ago, heading east, carrying a silk-wrapped package and a pet marmot. You nod like this is normal, because out here it is. Obscure tidbit of the day. Some elite messengers traveled with personal animals, not just horses, but falcons, cats, even marmots. The logic, companionship maybe, or dramatic flair. Historians still debate whether these animals had any official function or were just extremely committed sidekicks. You ride out again as clouds form bruises across the sky. Rain begins. Not hard, just a soft tapping, like the earth is drumming its fingers. Your cloak soaks slowly. Your horse doesn't complain. Neither do you. You pass a half-buried skull. Animal, you hope. Probably. It stares upward, hollow-eyed and opinionated. Then, unexpectedly, a roadside shrine. A small stack of stones with horsehair braided around them. You dismount, touch the top stone, and whisper something useless. Not a prayer, just a hope. You remount, squinting into the mist. The world looks slightly blurred now, like an old painting with too many fingerprints. You imagine you're the fingerprint. The next hill gives way to a shallow valley where dozens of birds nest in a rock wall. They rise as you pass, a soft chaos of wings and sound. Your horse flinches. You pat its neck and murmur something about oats and destiny. You're not far from the next station when the rain stops and the air shifts. Warmer. Sleepier. A sign you're nearing a warmer region or at least a kinder one. You loosen your cloak. Your bones feel a bit less argumentative. And just as the sun peeks through again, you see it. A yurt with red paint on the door and a horse grazing nearby. The keeper waves lazily. He's missing 2 teeth but radiates hospitality. Inside, a kettle of tea sings over a fire. You sip and it tastes like bark, but good bark. Cozy bark. The kind you'd compliment in a forest. You settle by the fire, close your eyes for a moment, and feel the road in your spine. It doesn't let you go. It never does. You sleep for exactly 22 minutes. Then you rise, adjust the pouch with its mysterious scroll, and step out again into the waiting, wide unknown. You ride now under a pale blue sky, the kind that doesn't make promises. The clouds hover like quiet onlookers, letting the sun do most of the work. The trail dips and rises again, like someone couldn't quite decide whether the road should be difficult or charming. Your horse has found its rhythm, trotting with that practiced nonchalance of a creature who's done this hundreds of times. You, however, feel every bump. But at least the wind is on your side today. At your back, like a ghost giving you a little push. You pass a line of worn stones embedded in the ground, just barely visible beneath the grass. They aren't natural. Someone hundreds of years ago laid them here, maybe as a border, maybe as a guide. Or maybe someone just liked organizing rocks. People have done stranger things. You shift your weight in the saddle and peer down at the satchel, which remains defiantly sealed. The string binding it is waxed and tight, knotted with a kind of dignity. You've been carrying this message for days now, and still you haven't the faintest idea what it says. Could be poetry. Could be war. Could be both. Major historical fact of the moment. Mongol couriers were strictly forbidden from opening messages. The penalty ranged from demotion to death, depending on how curious you were and how important the message was. Better not to wonder. But you do anyway. A bird whistles in a way that almost sounds sarcastic. You take it personally. Then another or two. This one's different. It's larger than the others. Built with wooden beams and plastered mud. The walls bear faint decorative swirls in red and gold. A carved sun emblem sits over the doorway. You dismount, stretch, and walk toward the entrance, where an old woman sits peeling something that might be a root or might be a decorative candle. Hard to tell. She nods to you like she already knows your whole life. Horse first, she says. You do as you're told: water, feed, brush. The horse eats like it hasn't seen food in a year. Typical. Inside the station, there's a long bench covered in furs and a stove that breathes slow heat into the room. The walls are covered in faded charcoal drawings. Some of battles, some of horses. One that suspiciously resembles a yak playing a flute. Here comes your obscure cultural tidbit. Some yam stations doubled as inns and local art galleries of sorts. Traveling scholars, painters, even monks would leave drawings or etchings behind. Think of it as the ancient steppes version of graffiti, but with more respect for livestock. You trade news with the keeper, who tells you that a merchant caravan passed through last week carrying spices from India and a map drawn entirely in symbols. Apparently, no one has figured it out yet, but everyone agrees it looks impressive. He also tells you, with a raised eyebrow, that wolves have been spotted a few valleys west. You nod solemnly. Wolves are always part of the deal. Sometimes they're literal. Sometimes they're just metaphors for deadlines. Historians still debate whether Mongol couriers traveled in pairs in particularly dangerous regions. Some evidence suggests buddy systems existed. Others argue that speed was valued more than safety. Either way, no courier wanted to be remembered as the one who got eaten mid-scroll, after a hearty bowl of stew. Tangy, smoky, and vaguely mysterious, you set off again. The hills are steeper now, and the road is marked with wool grooves so old they've become fossils. You follow them anyway. The wind picks up. Ahead you see smoke in the distance, not from a fire, but from dust. Riders. You squint, and two horses emerge on the path, galloping toward you. One is riderless. The other carries a courier in a red sash, waving wildly. You slow down, unsure whether this is urgent or theatrical. Turns out it's both. The courier reins in beside you and gasps. Lost him. Saddle broke. Fell. sprained leg, can't finish the run. He gestures to the pouch at his side, which dangles half unwrapped like an insult to protocol. You glance at your own pouch still intact, then back at him. So now you carry two. The scroll you've been guarding like a sacred text now has a companion. One's wrapped in leather, the other in silk. Both are heavier than you'd expect, emotionally anyway. The other courier limps to the side of the path, muttering something about ruined boots and disrespectful mules. You promise to pass the message along. Not his complaint, just the scroll. And so the burden doubles. But hey, no pressure. You move faster now. Not because you're in a hurry, but because momentum has become a form of peace. Two scrolls, two destinies, one saddle. The weight isn't just physical. It's the weight of trust, of empire, of very literal expectations. The trail narrows into a gorge. Steep rock on either side, the kind that channels wind into a low, constant moan. Somewhere high above, birds echo your path. You glance up, wondering if they're following or simply bored. The horse, ever the realist, just keeps walking. You pass a stone marker shaped like a turtle. It's too deliberate to be coincidence, carved into the slope of a hill like it's crawling through the landscape. Someone left flowers at its base. Wild ones, yellow and purple. Here's your historical snack. Mongol couriers didn't just move messages. They transported tribute, diplomatic gifts, and relics. Some even carried prayer scrolls from one monastery to another, which means technically you might be delivering blessings and war declarations at the same time. What a combo! You come upon a resting place with no station. Just a low rock wall, a fire pit, and a leather water pouch hanging from a tree. Someone's left it behind on purpose for the next traveler. For you. You drink from it and feel a little more human. A goat appears from nowhere, stares at you, then walks away like it has places to be. You briefly wonder if it's symbolic. Probably not. But in this landscape, anything might be a metaphor. You ride on. The landscape opens again, broad and rolling, sun-drenched now. Grass sways in waves, and you feel like a boat sailing across a sea of time. It's not poetic. It's just true. You're not in a rush, but you're not standing still either. The next yam station is an oddity. It's run by monks. The yurt is larger than usual, ringed with prayer flags and carved stones. Incense curls through the entrance, and soft chanting hums in the air like bees in slow motion. You dismount, bow slightly out of instinct, and are greeted by a monk with surprisingly bright eyes. He speaks little, but gestures with grace. Inside, a table holds dried fruit, boiled grain, and a bowl of fermented mare's milk. You take the fruit. The milk gets a respectful nod and no further action. You hand the monk your horse, who seems oddly peaceful here. Even horses can tell when a place is sacred. Here comes your obscure tidbit. Some Mongol yam stations were maintained by religious orders, especially in regions where monasteries dominated the local culture. These monks weren't just caretakers. They were part of the empire's communication network, bound by both duty and prayer. As you rest, the monk brings out a small scroll, not to send but to show. It's a poem, written in old script, describing the journey of a heron flying from the steppe to the sea. He reads it aloud in a voice like old wood. You don't understand the words, but the rhythm lulls something loose in your chest. You sleep for a while. No dreams, just quiet. When you wake, the monk hands you a string of beads and bows. You nod, tie the beads around your wrist, and leave without speaking. Words feel too loud here. Outside, the sky has shifted again, now a deep silver. Evenings whisper. Historians still debate whether couriers were allowed to stop at monasteries for more than rest. Some records suggest secret messages were exchanged through these religious stations. Others think the monks were simply a very reliable postal branch. You ride through twilight, the wind soft again, the air like warm cloth. 2 scrolls, 1 horse, and the road. You'll stop again soon. But not yet. The light fades the way parchment darkens when damp. Slowly, unevenly, and with a kind of weary elegance. You ride now into the quietest time of day, when the wind hushes, and even the grass seems to lean in and listen. Somewhere behind you, a marmot squeaks. It's probably gossiping. The road ahead splits into 2. One path wide and rutted from cart wheels, the other narrow and stony, weaving uphill like it's shy. Your horse snorts and tilts its head toward the hill. You shrug. Sure, why not? As you climb, the world around you changes texture. The air grows cooler, tinged with the scent of juniper and cold stone. Rocks crunch under hoof, and a few distant sheep blink at you from ledges like they weren't expecting guests. One bleats. It sounds offended. Halfway up, you pause and glance back. The steppe stretches out behind you in golden bands. You can still see the outline of the last or 2, like a tiny thought sitting on the edge of memory. There's a comfort in knowing where you came from, even if the road ahead offers no such clarity. Major historical fact incoming. Mongol courier routes were mapped with incredible accuracy. Roads stretched from Korea to Hungary, and many sections included detailed distance markers. One traveler noted that you could predict a station's location within a half-mile, even in bad weather. That's more than you can say for modern GPS. You crest the hill and find, of all things, a shrine. It's modest. Just a circle of stones, some dried flowers, a carved wooden figure half buried in dust. But someone has been here recently. There are horse tracks. A cup of water sits on the ground, perfectly balanced on a flat rock, untouched. You dismount, stretch, and sit beside it. Not to pray necessarily, just to be still. Your scrolls rest against your side, wrapped like secrets in cloth and leather. You wonder again what they carry. The temptation to peek flickers in your brain like a candle guttering. But you don't. Here's your obscure cultural tidbit. Some Mongol couriers were trained to memorize the contents of messages in case the physical scroll was lost or destroyed, which meant some of them recited letters or orders like mantras while they rode. It was a job, sure, but also a performance, a galloping opera of statecraft. You sit longer than intended. Eventually you rise, pat your horse, and continue down the other side of the hill. The road curves like spilled ink, looping through a patch of low forest, birch and pine mostly. The canopy dapples the world in sleepy patterns of shadow and gold. It feels like walking through a lullaby. Then, without warning, something darts across the path. A fox. Small, red-furred, and absurdly confident. It stops, looks you dead in the eye, then vanishes into the brush like it had better things to do. Which it probably did. Night falls quickly after that. You ride until you see firelight flickering in the distance. Soft, orange, promising. Another station. Or maybe just someone else who didn't want to sleep in the dark. Historians still debate how often couriers traveled alone. Some records say they went in pairs. Others suggest that lone riders were trusted with more sensitive missions. Either way, there was always a network just ahead or just behind, like a long string of lights over the world, blinking on and off as needed. You arrive at the fire. There's a proper or two, this one built against a rock outcrop to block the wind. The host, a grizzled man with missing teeth and an elaborate beard, waves you over without standing. Inside, stew. Always stew. This one smells like lamb and something smoky. You're too tired to care what. You eat, drink, and listen as the host tells you a story about a courier who once outran a thunderstorm by 3 whole valleys. You nod because maybe it's true, and even if it's not, it should be. You lie down that night on a thick mat of furs, the scrolls still beside you. Your horse sleeps too, and everything waits until morning. Dawn slides in like an apology, gentle and peach-colored, a soft hush after the sharp quiet of night. You wake to the sound of wind brushing through grass and the faint clatter of hooves in the distance. Somewhere nearby, someone is singing. Not well, but not badly either. You rise, stretch, and greet the day like a polite guest. Breakfast is flatbread, dried cheese, and tea so strong it could probably remove varnish. You drink it anyway, because Mongol tea doesn't ask for your opinion. Your host from the night before grunts something in farewell and hands you a fresh set of reins. Braided horsehair with little silver charms tied near the bit. Keeps the messages safe, he says. You nod, like that's not the most superstitious thing you've ever heard. But hey, it can't hurt. You mount up and ride back into the world, which seems cleaner now, washed by dreams or dew or some cosmic housekeeping service. This stretch of land is flatter, more open. You can see for miles. A group of wild horses gallops in the distance, kicking up dust and ignoring all laws of courtesy. You watch them until they disappear into a mirage. Then a choice. The main path continues straight. A known road, well-worn, dotted with markers. But to the right, a smaller track leads off toward a ridge that might offer a shortcut, or might offer wolves. Your horse looks at the safe road. You look at the shortcut. You take the shortcut. Half an hour in, you regret it. The track narrows to a miserable ribbon of gravel and roots. A tree tries to slap you in the face. A bird mocks you with a screech that sounds suspiciously like laughter. Major historical fact to the rescue. Mongol couriers were allowed to choose alternate routes if they deemed the main path unsafe or delayed, but they were expected to arrive on time regardless. Flexibility with accountability. A terrifying combination. You finally crest the ridge and, well, it was worth it. Below you, the valley opens like a book. A river cuts through the middle, curving like a serpent. On the far bank, a bridge, wooden, arched, guarded by a station that looks more fortress than hut. Smoke curls lazily from its chimney. You descend. The bridge groans under your weight but holds. The guards wave you through after a quick glance at your seal. An iron tag marked with the emblem of the yam. No one questions a courier, mostly because they don't want your job. Inside the station, it's quiet, clean, too clean. The walls are lined with scroll racks. Messages in and out, stacked like promises. You hand over the silk-wrapped scroll. The clerk, young, tired, possibly a ghost, nods, stamps it, and tucks it into a slot marked South. Obscure cultural tidbit. Some yam stations also functioned as archives. Messages weren't just passed along. They were sometimes copied, cataloged, and stored. That means someone out there has a filing system dating back to Genghis Khan's grocery list. Probably. You rest here briefly. Your horse is swapped out for a fresh one. Sleek, eager, practically vibrating. This one's got ambition. You like that. You keep the leather scroll. Its destination lies further still. Historians still debate whether the yam used coded language within scrolls to deter espionage. Some claim that certain symbols meant different things depending on who was reading. Others think the handwriting was just bad. Hard to say. Back on the road, the wind shifts. You're heading into hill country now. The trees grow thicker. The path narrows again. Shadows fall longer. But the scroll is lighter now. And the silence somehow is friendlier. The trees speak in their own language now. Soft creaks, sighs of pine. The occasional rustle like a secret changing hands. You ride beneath their whispering canopy, where sunlight filters down like it's being weighed and measured before reaching the ground. Somewhere overhead, a raven croaks. Another replies, probably judging you. The horse, your new one, the ambitious one, seems to like this stretch. His hooves land quieter, more certain. Its ears twitch less. You name it vice president for no reason at all. You've entered the forest corridor that weaves toward the central plains. A region marked on ancient yam maps with phrases like moderate elevation and increased bear risk. The branches grow close. Lichen stretches across trunks like slow green fire, and the world smells of wet bark and old soil. Up ahead, you spot a carved sign nailed to a bent tree, or 212 li. A Mongol li isn't quite the same as a Chinese li. And frankly, you're not even sure which system this forest uses. Could be 12 more miles or 12 more hours. Your horse chooses to believe the former. Major historical fact. Yam distances weren't just measured by geography. They were based on how long it would take a rider at speed. So, yes, a mountain li might be half the length of a valley li. Precision was less important than predictability. Eventually, the trees open like curtains and the path spills out into a clearing where you find a man with a chicken. Not a metaphoric chicken. A real one. Fat, feathered, perched on his arm like a very unimpressed hawk. The man nods as if you've arrived precisely on cue. You're early, he says, frowning. I just sat down. You have no idea who he is. but he waves you toward a low fire and hands you a bowl of broth that smells suspiciously like its feathered companion. The chicken glares. You apologize silently. Turns out he's another courier. Headed north. He's waiting for a fresh horse and a message that was supposed to arrive yesterday. Delayed by snow, he mutters. Or wolves. Or a flirtatious marmot. Who knows anymore? You sit together in companionable silence, broken only by the sound of spoons and the chicken's softly clucking disapproval. Here's your obscure cultural tidbit. Some Mongol couriers developed complex forms of whistling or throat singing to communicate across long distances without dismounting. The sound could carry across valleys. A kind of long-distance Morse code, but weirder. After the meal, the other courier offers to trade a joke for a story. You give him one about a scribe who couldn't read his own handwriting. He gives you a tale of a courier who once rode for 3 days straight to deliver a love letter, only to discover it was a grocery list. You laugh because why not? Historians still debate whether couriers were allowed to read the messages they carried. Technically, no. Practically, probably yes. If someone trusts you with state secrets and 200 miles of responsibility, a little curiosity might sneak in. Your companion eventually gets his horse and departs. You refill your water skin and mount up again. Vice President seems energized by the chicken broth fumes. You press on. Twilight comes faster now. The sky turns from gold to gray to plum-colored bruise. Crickets begin their nightly symphony. Tuneless, chaotic, oddly comforting. You ride into the next station under a crescent moon. This one's built partly into the side of a hill, half earthen mound, half log cabin. A young girl greets you at the gate with a wooden lantern. She's barefoot and carries herself like a queen. The station master is her father, one-legged, bearded, slow-moving but sharp-eyed. "Courier?" he asks. You nod. "Hungry?" You nod again. He waves you in with a sigh like he's been expecting you for years. Inside, warmth. Food. A bed of furs so soft it feels illegal. You fall into it like a stone into deep water. Morning doesn't so much arrive as it politely taps the window and offers to come back later. But you stir anyway, your body twitching with leftover momentum, like a cart that keeps rolling even after the ox stops. You're not in a hurry, but your limbs don't know that. The station master is already awake, playing a game with carved bone dice and a one-eyed cat. The girl offers you bread and goat butter, then takes a wax tablet and scratches your name on it. "For records," she says. Her handwriting is terrifyingly neat. Outside, the world is drenched in dew. Your horse has been brushed, watered, and gifted a charm of braided red thread tied to its harness. For protection, the girl explains. "Not that you'll need it," she adds, "but sometimes the sky forgets who you are." She says it like a weather report. You thank them both, mount up, and begin the day's ride along a path that slopes downward into the basin of the eastern river plain. Mist clings low over the reeds, making the world feel softer around the edges. Somewhere, a heron lifts off like a slow-moving dream. You don't speak today. The silence is too complete to break. Major historical fact. The Mongol Yam system spanned over 100,000 miles and had more than 1,400 relay stations. Some were spaced as close as 25 miles apart. Others stretched depending on terrain. This wasn't just a postal network. It was the internet of its time. As you ride, the terrain shifts. Trees thin, grasses thicken, and soon you're surrounded by open waterlogged plains. The horses' hooves squelch with every step. Dragonflies buzz past your ears, enormous and iridescent. You keep your scroll wrapped tight. Damp ruins everything. Up ahead, a flat-bottomed boat waits at the edge of a wide river. More like a moving lake, really. The ferryman looks half asleep. He rouses only when you cough politely and hold up your seal. He grunts. "Courier." You nod. "North or southbound?" "South." He gestures for you to board. The horse is used to this, stepping onto the wooden raft with theatrical patience. As the boat glides across the water, the ferryman sings a low, wordless tune. Sounds like wind through reeds. You suspect it's to keep himself awake. Here's your obscure cultural tidbit. Ferrymen along the Yam were sometimes required to memorize the faces of every courier who passed through. If one went missing, they were often the first to notice. That's right, facial recognition before photography. Halfway across, the ferryman stops paddling. "Want to hear something weird?" he asks. You nod. "Of course." "There's a story," he says, "that one of Genghis Khan's messengers once rode into a lake by accident. He was so tired, he thought the reflection of the sky was the road. Drowned. Message still delivered, though. Horse swam the last half mile." You blink. "Is that true?" He shrugs. "Maybe. The horse probably tells it better." Historians still debate the boundaries between historical courier routes and local folklore. Some accounts blur into myth. A rider who never aged. A horse that knew the stars. A station where no one ever slept. Useful stories, if not factual ones. You reach the far shore. Another stretch of land. Another road. Another 50 miles until the next rest. But for now, the path curves gently, like it's been saving the best view for you. The hills roll low in gold, dotted with wildflowers. Bees hum. A hawk circles. You ride on, and the wind carries you forward. You ride for hours with the wind at your back, as if it's nudging you along gently, like an over-attentive ant. The trail follows the curves of the hills, wide and forgiving, the kind of path that makes you believe you've somehow entered the flattering part of the journey. The sun has risen into its confident mid-morning phase, bright but not rude. Your horse's hooves make a soft rhythm on the dusty trail, a quiet percussion beneath the vast, unblinking sky. The map you carry shows a straight line from here to the next station, which is cute, considering the path actually winds like a dropped ribbon. But straight lines are for bureaucrats and stonecutters, not couriers with strong thighs and existential questions. Major historical fact: Mongol couriers didn't just rely on trails or visible landmarks. They also used coded knots in cords, like an ancient form of tactile GPS. The number and spacing of knots could signify turns, dangers, or expected times. Lose your map? Feel your belt. It knew the way. You pass a shrine, not a fancy one, just a stone cairn stacked with care. A few tufts of yak hair tied around a post, a tiny cup of milk left for the spirits. You dismount for a moment, not because you have to, but because it feels right. You add a pebble to the cairn. Obscure cultural tidbit. Some Yam couriers traveled with small personal talismans, things like horse teeth, carved bone, or even scented twigs from their home valley, to keep them connected to where they came from. Imagine carrying your favorite candle everywhere but without the fire hazard. Back on the trail, a pair of gazelles startle in the distance, leaping away like guilt in motion. You watch them go, grateful not to be chasing anything today. Ahead, a faint structure appears on the horizon. Mud brick walls, low and square. It looks like someone tried to build a bakery and stopped halfway. That's your next station. As you get closer, you hear shouting. Not angry, just busy. The sound of small disasters being managed. A man with a bandaged knee limps out to meet you, muttering to himself and carrying a broom. "Horse stepped on the grain again," he says by way of greeting. "That's the third time this week. We're going to have to start labeling them feet and not feet." He waves you in. The station is in mild chaos. 3 chickens, 1 very pregnant goat, and at least 4 children doing something that probably started as a game and devolved into theater. The place smells of sweet smoke, fresh dung, and boiling lentils. You're given tea before you can ask. It's the law of the yam. Food first, questions later. The youngest child sits across from you, eyes wide. "Are you a hero?" You shake your head. "Just tired." She nods solemnly. That's what all the heroes say. Historians still debate whether the Mongol relay stations doubled as community centers or simply tolerated the chaos around them. Some stations were clearly well-organized government outposts. Others were essentially heavily armed kindergartens. You leave the station after a short nap and a long conversation with the goat, who has excellent boundaries. The road after that is narrower, the grass taller. You pass an abandoned cart, its wheels sunken and cracked, half swallowed by weeds. Nature takes back everything. Slowly, politely, with moss. A hawk calls overhead, and your horse flicks an ear. You're getting close now. Not to the end, not quite, but to a turning point. The wind changes, and you follow. The plains give way to cliffs, sudden and theatrical, like the land decided it was bored of being flat. The road carves itself into the rock, hugging the edge where grass stops and stone begins. You keep your eyes forward. The drop on your right is not your business. Your horse agrees. The sky shifts again, as it always does. Clouds smudging into soft wool overhead, casting wide shadows across the canyon below. Somewhere out there, a river snakes through the stone like a silver thread in a giant's tapestry. You reach a small rest station carved partially into the cliffside. It is barely more than a door in the rock. The station master is a woman with calloused hands and a voice like river gravel. She gives you the look of someone who's seen 20 couriers and only liked 2. But she feeds you anyway, dried plums, flatbread, and a stew that tastes suspiciously of mushrooms and long stories. Major historical fact. These cliffside stations were sometimes guarded by former soldiers or elders too injured for battle. They were the beating heart of information management, especially in politically sensitive areas. Trust flowed both ways, letters and loyalty. Inside, the walls are covered in charcoal drawings, maps, faces, diagrams of horses, jokes in bad script. You recognize one scribble: "Turn back, bad soup." Someone underlined it twice. You add your own: "Still better than goat stew in station number 3. She laughs when she sees you writing. "You met the goat?" "Briefly. She's doing well." Obscure cultural tidbit. Some couriers developed running jokes that followed the entire YAM network. Drawings, symbols, riddles carved into gates or painted onto saddles. A kind of relay graffiti. If memes could ride horses, that's what they'd be. You leave with a full stomach and a charcoal smudge on your sleeve. The path downward is switchbacked and steep. You walk beside your horse to give its legs a break. The rocks crunch under your boots like stale bread. You remember the cord around your waist, the one with the knots. You count them again, feeling the tension loosen. Just a few more turns. A few more stations. At the base of the cliff, you cross a bridge of planks tied with rope. It sways like it's composing poetry about instability. You don't look down. The other side smells like damp ferns and anticipation. As you ride into the trees again, you notice the light has shifted. Slanted, amber, the color of honey left too long in the sun. It's late afternoon, and the day is slipping. A boy on a donkey passes you in the opposite direction. He tips his hat. The donkey does not. "Storm coming," he calls. "Sky's been mumbling all morning." He's right. You feel it too, the air growing heavier, the kind of pressure that makes animals twitchy and couriers faster. Historians still debate how much weather data the Mongols could predict through observation alone. Some believe the YAM relied on seasonal patterns and intuition passed down through families. Others suspect an elaborate superstition calendar involving frogs and unusually round clouds. You pick up the pace. By nightfall, you're riding under a sky bruised with purple and blue, lightning flashing so far away it doesn't even make a sound. Yet, the next station is a flicker of firelight between trees. You reach it just as the rain begins, soft at first, like a secret, then louder, like applause for your timing. The station master opens the door before you knock. "You made it," she says. You smile. "Barely." She takes your horse. Someone hands you a towel. You're wrapped in warmth and wood smoke again. Another day done. Another storm kept outside. You lie on the mat and watch the candle flicker. You dream of wind knots and goats. And somewhere behind your dreams, the road waits. The storm doesn't wake you. It does everything else. Rattles shutters, dances on the roof, howls through the trees like a bard who got turned away from every tavern. But you sleep through it all. The kind of sleep that presses you flat and leaves creases in your soul. When you finally stir, the rain is only a memory, leaving behind the smell of wet earth and pine needles. You sit up slowly, like a scroll being unrolled after years in a dusty chest. Outside, the forest glistens. Every leaf is heavy with droplets. Every path puddled and soft. Your next leg of the journey isn't far now. They said the capital was only 2 days away. Give or take a few horseshoes and arguments with ducks who think they own the road. You eat breakfast, rice gruel and dried apricots, and take your leave with a nod. Words aren't necessary this morning. Everything feels quiet in a respectful way, like even the birds are tired. The air is thick but cool. Mist hangs between the trees like gossip from the sky, and you find yourself grateful for the slower pace. It's not that your horse is lazy, it's just reflective. Major historical fact. Some Mongol couriers rode upwards of 200 miles in a single day thanks to relay stations swapping out tired horses for fresh ones. But not every leg was a sprint. Some were like this: forest paths, slow climbs, and days where distance took second place to delicacy. You pass a tree struck by lightning. It split clean down the middle, one side scorched and the other green as ever. You don't stop to take a closer look. Some metaphors are best left unexplored. Further down, the road winds through a small valley filled with shallow pools. You dismount and walk your horse through the water, both of you making ripples, both of you avoiding the frogs. Obscure cultural tidbit. Mongol couriers sometimes wore woven reed sandals over their boots when wading through marshy lands. Not because it kept them dry, but because it made them less likely to sink and disappear into a bog forever, which was generally considered bad for delivery times. The valley ends at another station. This one is shaped like a boat flipped upside down. Arched beams, curved roof, a structure made to shrug off storms. The station master here is ancient, or perhaps timeless. It's hard to tell when someone moves slower than moss. She doesn't speak much, just gestures toward tea, then gestures again at a map scrawled across an entire animal hide nailed to the wall. It's beautiful. The rivers are silver ink. The city's little square stamps. Roads drawn as braided strands, some thicker, some trailing off. She taps a point near the center. "You're here," she rasps, then taps a dot to the east. "You're going there." And with a final nod, she returns to her spot by the window, where she continues carving a flute out of bone. Historians still debate whether these old maps were standard or created ad hoc at each station. Some show astonishing precision, others more of a vibe. You leave with a clearer sense of direction and a mild craving to learn the flute. The road continues uphill, out of the forest and into hills that roll like sea waves frozen mid-surge. The wind is constant here, full of small insects and large opinions. You ride steadily, and somewhere between one turn and the next, you realize you're nearly there. Not just geographically, but narratively, emotionally, and perhaps even philosophically. The capital is close, and whatever waits inside its walls, your story is heading toward it like a letter addressed in all caps. The first sign of the city is not walls or towers, but dust. A haze on the horizon, kicked up by 1,000 hooves and 100 wagons. Then the sound, faint but unmistakable. Bells, voices, the clang of metal that could either be commerce or music, depending on optimism. You crest a hill and there it is. The city, not the mythical golden city of a tale, but something far more believable. Dirty, alive, sprawling in organized chaos like someone spilled civilization on a rug and decided it looked fine that way. Your horse snorts. You pat its neck. Almost done, partner. Major historical fact. The Mongol capital at Karakoram was not a jewel-encrusted palace city. It was practical, multicultural, and filled with artisans, scribes, and foreign envoys. One French monk even reported a silver tree in the Khan's palace that dispensed fermented mare's milk. The future, clearly. As you ride closer, you pass the outer sprawl. Herders selling wool. A man roasting barley cakes on a hot stone. Children pretending to be warriors with sticks and pots for helmets. You remember the first village you passed at the start of this journey. One chicken. One old man. One awkward hello. This is louder. Obscure cultural tidbit. The capital had a quarter specifically for foreign merchants, where languages collided and occasionally formed pigeons. Trade was welcome, so were interesting hats. A man once tried to pay his taxes in amber beads and was given a job in the treasury. The city gates rise in front of you. Stone, wood, and prayer flags fluttering like butterflies that believe in bureaucracy. You're waved through with barely a glance. Another dusty traveler in a line of stories. Inside, the streets twist like braided rope. Everything is layered, smells, sounds, intentions. You pass a spice market and sneeze twice. A man selling paper birds tries to upsell you to a kite. Children run with one of your earlier courier jokes chalked on their backs. Ask me about Station 3's soup. It lives. You stop at the Yam post office, an actual building, with stone lions flanking the door and a smell of ink and overworked administrators. The clerk takes your letter with a yawn. You're late, he says. Storm, you reply. He doesn't argue. Historians still debate how efficiently the Mongol Yam system integrated into urban centers. What's certain is that it worked, often better than the systems that came centuries after. You step outside. The city unfolds before you. Alleys full of secrets, towers with rusting bells, libraries with guards napping beside scrolls. And despite the noise, the pace, the pulse of the place, you feel calm. You delivered the message. You crossed the miles. You saw the stations, met the goats, drank the soup. And now the road doesn't demand anything of you. You sit on a stone bench beside a fountain and let the sun do what it does best. Make things golden and slightly nostalgic. And somewhere in your saddlebag, your next map is already waiting. The fountain murmurs behind you. Someone's laundry flaps lazily from a balcony. In the distance, a musician strums a bowed lute with all the urgency of molasses sliding down a ceramic bowl. You're still sitting on that bench. Not out of exhaustion anymore, but out of something harder to define. Something like contentment or the sense that if you moved, the breeze might disapprove. A messenger passes by in a cloud of dust, younger than you, brighter-eyed, carrying a satchel full of ambition and receipts. You nod as they pass. They don't see you. That's all right. In the heart of Karakoram, nothing stops, not even the dreams. You rise eventually. Maybe the sun moved. Maybe your stomach did. You wander with no real direction, a luxury you've earned. Down one alley is a man carving a chessboard into a stump. Down another, a baker tossing flatbread high enough to rival birds. Children chase a goat with flowers tied to its horns. No one looks particularly alarmed. Major historical fact: Karakorum was known for its blend of cultures. Persian masons built its mosques. Chinese artisans shaped its ceramics. Russian captives forged its tools. A city more like a mosaic than a monument. The road leads you to the river. Low banks, still water, a single skiff drifting with the current, paddled by a man who whistles off-key but with conviction. You sit on a rock and watch. There's nothing dramatic left to do. No twist. No urgent errand. Just the satisfying realization that you crossed a continent by rhythm, not rush. Obscure cultural tidbit. Some Mongol riders trained birds to deliver short messages when terrain made even a horse impractical. One such bird allegedly flew 30 miles carrying a note that simply read, "Send soup." You lie back in the grass. Above you, clouds pass like soft couriers. Slow, shapeless, vaguely judgmental. Historians still debate whether Genghis Khan himself ever used the Yam system or merely oversaw its construction. What's agreed is that he built a legacy that moved, not just soldiers and letters but knowledge. And you moved with it, through storms and valleys, past temples and feasts, around bickering merchants and curious goats. You slept in haylofts and danced with maps. You had soup twice and didn't complain once. Now the wind rustles your sleeve. Not urgently, just a nudge, a reminder. Journeys don't really end. They just become stories. Final wind down. The breeze softens as the sun leans west, bathing the rooftops of Karakorum in warm, brushed gold. Shadows stretch slowly across cobbled streets, the kind that remember every footstep, every hoofprint, every whispered conversation in languages now lost to memory. You lie still. Grass tickles your wrists. The river murmurs nearby, a lullaby of water on stone. A faint scent of barley cakes wafts from somewhere unseen. Familiar now, like an old friend's laugh. Above, the sky melts into deep blue, then velvet. Lanterns flicker on. Tiny stars below echoing the ones above. The city sighs. Even the markets hush. Your eyes drift. The soundscape grows quieter. A dog padding past with a stick too large for its ambitions. A child giggling somewhere behind a curtain. A flute played badly but with feeling. Your thoughts slow too. Not in a sleepy haze exactly, but like pages of a book turning more gently. You remember the cracked tea bowls, the ancient maps, the stations that always had soup, somehow. You remember the road that shimmered with heat, then glistened with rain. You remember the faces, some stern, some kind, all busy being alive in a story that unfolded one hoofbeat at a time. You don't need to remember every name, just how it felt. You breathe in. You let it go. Let the city keep buzzing quietly behind you. Let the mountains stay in the distance like punctuation at the end of a poem. Let the road carry someone else for now. You've traveled far enough. Now finally you can rest. Soft wind, soft stars, soft sky. The journey is complete. Sleep well, traveler. We'll ride again someday.